Hey everyone, today I'm back out here with my friend Dan, which means we're going to be looking at another military surplus rifle. And this is the Madsen M47, correct?
Correct.
This has a very interesting distinction as far as history goes. Can you explain what makes this thing a little bit special?
What makes this rifle special is that it's the last general issue bolt-action rifle.
Yeah, so it was made in 1947, as the name would imply, or designed in the 1947, but it wasn't actually adopted by anybody until 1958.
Yep.
And it was the Colombian Navy at that. So we have a nice little Colombian seal here on the side of it.
Which we'll show you close up later on.
Yeah, and this thing has a lot of really interesting features that, as we were talking about before we started rolling here, features that if it had come out maybe 10 years earlier,
or 5 years,
yeah, even 5 years earlier would have made this thing a pretty interesting and viable option. But given the date that this thing entered service, it really just leaves me scratching my head asking why anyone in charge of procurement for any government or law enforcement agency would pick this over just about any of the alternate options out there.
Well, they tried to sell. They build it as a modern rifle.
Sure.
Tried to sell it to not first world countries, but
Sure.
Third world, countries in Africa, South America, places that didn't have a lot of money for brand new semi-autos that were just hitting the market.
Yeah.
But I guess they didn't realize there was also lots of bolt-action rifles also hitting the market.
Right, especially post-war era, you got a lot of guns that are needing to find homes.
Good rifles like the 1903s and lots of K98s.
Yes.
Lots of K98s.
Lots of K98s, which... but again, this thing does have some interesting redeeming qualities about it. I don't want to make it sound like this is a completely pointless firearm.
It's a great rifle.
Yeah, it's a great rifle, great shooting. Actually, in fact, we were just shooting it too, and my first shots ever trying to shoot past 100 yards with this thing hit steel at 200 yards.
First shot, dead on.
First two in a row. So again, it's not a bad rifle, but for the purpose of this video, one of the things I'm going to kind of emphasize is why you might want a rifle like this, and it's probably not going to be for its practical utility.
Its practical utility is it's better than other mil-cert bolt-action rifles if you want to be like out hunting or walking around the farm.
Mm-hmm. I would say
that's
maybe.
Where it rises above others.
Yeah.
But at the time, it is designed.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that towards the end of the video when I do the wrap up about it. But
sorry,
first,
I jumped ahead.
It's okay. It's okay. So first, what we're going to do is just kind of run over the features of this thing, what this thing has on it, especially things that make it different from a lot of the alternatives when it came out. We'll do some more shooting with it, and then we'll wrap up our thoughts and hopefully help you decide if this is the type of rifle you would want to add to your collection, or if it's one that maybe is just better to appreciate in a YouTube video.
Yeah, which there's not many out there.
Right.
There's like 5 or 6 that I found talking about this rifle specifically.
Yeah, well, and even then, just in general numbers of rifles produced, it's pretty stinking low too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was around 5,000 or 6,000.
Yeah, supposedly the order was for 6,000. Mm-hmm. They delivered between 5,000 and 6,000, probably. So at most 6,000 of these are made.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into the features on these rifles.
Oh, you snapped it good.
No kidding.
That's dead on. Nice. That was just a hair over.
Just underneath it, maybe?
It had to be. I didn't see a dirt.
Well, either way, the first two with iron sight.
You know what? I have to say, I like the sight system.
So right off the bat, starting from the muzzle end here, we have something that sets this apart from any other military-produced bolt-action rifle that I've ever really paid much attention to, and that is this muzzle brake. So these things actually came standard with a muzzle brake, which, considering this thing is chambered in 30-06, is definitely an appreciated aspect of this thing, along with the butt pad, which we'll get to. But the brake is fairly effective compared to other just straight, unmitigated 30-06 rifles out there. You can shoot this a little bit more before it actually starts to become painful. So that's a good thing. The front sight on this is a hooded front sight, which is very similar to, honestly, even just like your old Mosin and Gaunt's, where you just have that circular hood and just a rectangular front post. I mean, technically it's a cylindrical front post, but from the shooter's perspective, just looks like a little rectangle. And it's perfectly serviceable. Is it the most precise out there? No, but it is perfectly serviceable, and it actually does allow for a better sight picture than I honestly expected with a sight setup like this. But moving back, we have a bayonet lug. Again, while these weren't produced in very large numbers, the ones that I've seen, I've never actually seen a bayonet, but we do actually have the bayonet for this one, which is pretty neat. The weird thing is they didn't serialize their bayonets, so even though we do have a bayonet here, see, I should be able to still put it on while it's in the scabbard, right? Nope, I can't.
You can. It just yeah.
I'll just scoot this thing out. So we'll slide it over the top, and there we go. So this thing does have the bayonet. So again, they weren't necessarily serialized to the rifles as far as we can find out, but this one is pretty neat in that it does have the bayonet. So let's disconnect that.
Real easy to take on and off too.
Yeah, it's got a little detent button to take it on and off. Moving back, we have our little sling stud up here, or a little band, and this thing is not free floated or anything like that. This band does hold it nice and tight. So going further back, we have our rear sight here, which is adjustable for both elevation and windage, and it's surprisingly positive adjustments for both. You have this giant knob here on the side for your windage, and instead of like rotating it or swiveling it left to right, it actually physically moves the entire rear sight left and right on the gun, which works. And it has little hash marks so you can keep track of how far you're moving it. But the nice thing about this is with the positive clicks, if you are making adjustments for windage in a specific scenario, if you remember how many clicks you adjusted it, you can realistically get it back to what your zeroed setting was if you're going to a non-windy atmosphere or anything like that. So that is actually a pretty nice feature as far as bolt-action military service rear sights that I've had access to. For elevation, we have just kind of your standard rear tangent sight that goes from 100 yards out to 900 yards. So given that this thing is a later production, they have been a little bit more realistic with their engagement distances. You know, if you look at World War I and on, you see 2,000 yard range adjustments on the rear sights, which to me and just about anyone else is kind of ridiculous. This 900, I can see where that might actually be applicable, but
especially on the ocean.
Yeah, in the ocean where, again, the Colombian Navy using this, you know, you literally, as far as the eye can see, engagement distances, so I can see where that works. Then the rear sight aperture itself basically seems like a glorified eye bolt, but it actually works surprisingly well. And being forward of the action, it's a comparatively short sight radius compared to, you know, some like my Enfield number 4, which has the rear sight aperture in the back, some of the other rifles that have them in the back. But again, I was able to hit out at 200 yards using these irons, so that's not too shabby. And I'll do my best to get a picture of the sight picture, but just take my word for it. It's better than you might expect. As far as the action is kind of unique. It's not like a blatant ripoff of a Mauser action or anything like that you see a lot of post-World War II.
Well, they designed their own action.
Yeah, they did design their own action. It is stripper clip fed, holds 5 rounds in this internal magazine. And the stripper clips, we're not really sure what stripper clips these were designed for. Apparently, assuming it's a proprietary one, because we've tried Springfield 03 stripper clips and Mauser stripper clips, 8mm Mauser stripper clips, which have the same. They will hold on to 30-06, and both of them just, when you start to push the rounds in, they actually push the stripper clip in with them. So clearly those are not the ones designed for it. But theoretically, you can feed it with the stripper clip if you find ones that are made for it. But we can't figure out what that might be. Then if you're looking at the bolt here, it might look kind of weird because the bolt is pretty much, the handle I should say, is, if not centrally located, maybe even further forward on the entirety of the bolt itself, which makes it feel kind of weird when you're cycling it. It's a pretty long bolt with the safety and everything included. So it kind of feels a little bit awkward. It doesn't take a whole lot of getting used to. And I should say it has the last round hold open thing where the follower will prevent the bolt from traveling forward. So I'll go ahead and depress that so I can push this bolt forward. As you're actually closing it, again, it kind of in theory feels like a regular cock on open bolt, but because you have such a huge amount of the bolt rear of that handle, it does feel a little bit awkward. Now, having said that, I really like the safety design on these. Kind of like the flag safeties on the Mausers, where, you know, off to one side is safe, or fire, or vertical is on safe. This is very similar to that, except it has this little push button, I guess, detent that prevents you from knocking it out of place. So if you have any familiarity with the Mausers, you know you can just swipe it off, which is good, but it also means it could come off accidentally. With this, having that little push button before you can actually cycle it over to fire is a little bit of an added safety step, but it's very simple and easy to use and has a clearly marked S on top of the bolt back here for safe. So there's not going to be a lot of confusion there, and again, is very easy to use, which is kind of nice.
I also like the exposed striker, unlike Mauser's.
Oh, so you can manually.
Yep.
Yeah, and as my friend Dan mentioned, it does have an exposed striker, unlike the Mausers. So if you want a second strike or something like that, you can manually pull the striker back in order to recock it without having to actually cycle the bolt at all in order to get it to do that, which is you know, a nice feature. The trigger is okay. It's a military service rifle trigger. It's not the best. It's definitely not the worst. It's kind of in that medium where it's okay. Like, it's serviceable, but, you know, it is what it is.
You can make 200-yard hits.
Right, I can make 200-yard hits with it, and, you know, that counts for something. Then moving back, we do have the rear sling swivel, and then we have this rubberized butt pad, which is more effective than the rubber butt pad on my Enfield Jungle Carbine, but not quite as effective as like modern like limb saver pads or something like that. But it is appreciated, again, being a 30-06.
And it came standard.
Yeah, and it came standard on it, so even with the muzzle brake, it doesn't totally knock it down, the 30-06. The little butt pad back here does certainly help.
I do like that it's got really thick, you know, grippy. It locks into your shoulder.
Yeah, so you'll see these ridges right here, kind of like ruffles have ridges. That does do a good job of locking it into your shoulder. Again, to mention Mausers again, my M48 has a really polished metal back here, so every time you shoot, it just kind of wants to slide around on you. This, even with the heavier recoil, really locks it in so you can theoretically get faster follow-up shots, which is kind of nice. So now that we've run over pretty much the overview of this entire rifle, we'll do some more shooting with it, and then we'll come back and talk at you.
I can feel that muzzle brake working.
Now that we've kind of run over it and let you see some video of us shooting it, I want to kind of wrap up our thoughts about this. And again, I want to make sure I make it clear. I don't think that this is in its own respect, I don't think this is a bad rifle.
No, it's a great rifle.
Yeah, has good sights. I like that it's got a muzzle brake. It has some significant improvements over standard bolt-action rifles at the time-ish.
Yes.
However, again, Madsen M47, as it implies, made in 1947. That's the same year the AK-47 came out.
Yep.
As you pointed out, 2 years before 2 years after the SKS came out.
Yep.
Over a decade after the M1 Garand came out.
Yep.
So, it was pretty much obsolete before it was designed, as I would
Absolutely.
say.
Oh, yeah.
I know there are people who argue that with bolt-action rifles in general compared to semi-automatic rifles, but
For a military rifle, absolutely
yes,
it was.
yes. So yes, and that's a very important distinction to make. So I'm glad you said that. We're, I guess, specifically referring to if you're talking to a person in charge of acquisitions for military or law enforcement.
Yeah.
If you're just talking recreational shooting or hunting or any application like that, obviously bolt actions still serve a very important purpose. However, if we're strictly speaking about who this was being marketed to as a military service rifle, if I was someone in charge of procurement and they showed up at my door and said, "Hey, we got this great new rifle. We really think you should adopt it," I would just wonder why. Again, it does have nice features, but given the fact that it is a bolt-action rifle with a 5-round internal magazine in 30-06, just why? And as you mentioned, for naval purposes, it is nice to have a full-size battle rifle cartridge so you can make engagements a little bit further reliably. But even then, the FA. So again, these were adopted in 1958 by the Colombian Navy. The FAL entered service in 1954. Now, maybe there were political reasons why the Colombians couldn't have gotten those. I don't know, because I know there were political reasons why the Germans weren't able to adopt the FAL.
I think it was just money.
Yeah, I would assume it's money. But even when it comes to the topic of money, if again I were in charge of procurement, I would say, well, let's just retool everything to run Mausers.
Yeah.
Because there's a giant surplus of Mausers now. They're, I would assume, pretty cheap in 1958. I know they were cheap in 1995, so I can't imagine they were much more expensive in 1958.
And I mean, a lot of other South American countries were also using Mausers.
Sure. Yeah.
So
now, and again, I understand that maybe they like the 30-06 aspect of it, but again, maybe just get some surplus Garands.
Brazil had Mausers chambered in 30-06.
Really?
Yep. The Brazil. I mean, this was decades before.
Sure. So again,
Brazil switched pretty quickly to other.
And I think for good reason. So again, it's not a bad rifle in its own respect, but when you consider what was available at the time, not only it was introduced, but especially the time when it was adopted in 1958 by the Colombian military, just there's better things to have. So if you're coming at this from a collector standpoint, this does make a pretty neat collector piece because again, the numbers of rifles produced was extremely low.
Oh, yeah.
Significantly lower than any other rifle I've rolled in front of the camera here.
Especially for military rifles.
Yeah. And
5,000 is not a lot.
5,000 is not a lot. And when we're talking about recreational shooting, this does have a lot of things that make it nicer to shoot, like the muzzle brake, like the butt pad, and the fact that it's a caliber that is readily available here in the United States. Again, when I've rolled 303 Brit, you can find it, but apparently I'm lucky in that I can go down to some of my local shops and get it, but I know some of you out there can't. Now, if we were in Canada, that is obviously different. But here, 30-06 is readily available everywhere. Walmart, you can get it.
Forget about 30-40.
Yeah, 30-40 Crag. I mean, geez Louise. And again, we do have local shops here that carry it.
They have piles of it.
Right, but I know that is
expensive, though.
The exception and not the rule, because when I mentioned that in the 30-40 Crag video we did, I had people trying to say, that's a lie. You don't actually have it.
We could go take pictures.
Yeah, we could.
They literally have piles of it.
When I gave them the name of the store so they can even call them up and ask. But so again, if you're looking at this as a recreational piece or a collector's piece or just a fun gun to go out and shoot with, it's not a bad rifle. But if we're talking war fighting or service rifles, again, there's just better choices out there in my opinion. So if you do have an opportunity to pick one up, I would say I would probably take that up if you have the money to spend on it. Again, just because it is such a unique piece of history. But, if you're trying to outfit, a local militia group or something like that, there's far better choices.
Well, I could practically guarantee that you'd be the only one at the range.
Yes.
With an M47.
Yeah, and I honestly hadn't even heard of these until I saw the Military Arms Channel video he did on these. And then when he said, hey, I got one of those, I was like, oh, I want to shoot it. I want to see what it's like. And again, it's surprisingly pleasant to shoot for a 30-06. But again, if we're talking military or militia or anything like that type of style of usage, there's better choices.
They desperately tried to sell them. Yeah, you could order them in any configuration you wanted, any sight setup you wanted. It's just there was so many, bolt action rifles and semi-autos hitting the market.
Yeah, because again, 1954, you have the FAL, the right arm of the free world, as it ended up being, and then 1959, you have the HK91s. There's just other full-size semi-automatic battle rifles. The M1 Garand, again, obviously was already battle-proven in World War II and Korea at that point. So,
yep.
It is what it is. If you guys have an M47 or if you have experience with them, definitely let us know what you thought about them in the comment section down below. If you know of other interesting factoids about these that we didn't mention, definitely throw those down there in the comments as well, just because I'm always interested, because some of my viewers are very wide-ranging in experience and have some pretty interesting info.
If this had been around 10 years earlier.
Yeah, and again, I think that's worth reiterating. If this thing was...
Or 5 years earlier.
Yeah, even 5 years earlier. Again, I still think, obviously, this is blown out of the water by the M1 Garand. But in comparison to some of the bolt-action service rifles being fielded during World War II and a little bit before, this definitely has features that would have put this above some of those, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Even like the 06 or 03 Springfield. I probably would have rather had one of these than one of those.
I would, absolutely. The sights are so much better.
Sights are better, muzzle brake. There's a lot of things that make this nicer. But as soon as you start introducing semi-automatic magazine or end block clip fed guns into the equation, it just doesn't stand up. So I think we beat that horse enough. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go and throw those in the comment section down below as well. If you have recommendations or other surplus guns you want to see rolled in front of the camera, definitely let me know that as well. I really appreciate Dan being willing to let me shoot his ammo through this thing and let me shoot his guns, and we have some other fun toys out here to play with today. But again, it's always a good time, and I'm sure you'll see his other beard to complement my own here on the channel before too long to see some more interesting guns. I think we have SVT out here. We got some other interesting toys, so you'll be seeing those before too long.
Previews ahead.
Yes, for sure. So I do have a Patreon page, which helps facilitate a lot of these types of videos and helps me kind of... he doesn't want to take it, but I'm going to be giving some money for ammo after this, and that all comes directly from Patreon. So there's links down below if you're interested in doing that. I post all my content there early, as well as doing live streams, giveaways, updates, all that kind of stuff. So check that out if you're interested. I am also uploading to Full 30 and Gunstreamer. So if you want to find a place other than YouTube to watch your content because you hate what Google's trying to do, there are alternatives out there where I'm uploading videos too. So definitely check those out as well.
I've never heard of Gunstreamer.
Yeah, it's kind of
like YouTube.
It's a gun specific thing that is open access. So if you don't like that, you can't upload. If you're a fellow gun tuber and you can't upload to Full 30, Gunstreamer will take everything. I think there's like a 5 gigabyte upload limit, but other than that, you can upload there. You can watch videos there. And there's no ads right now, at least, because they don't have the market share. But there's no ads, so you don't have to worry about that. And you're supporting people that support the Second Amendment. So there's that. So with that plug out of the way, as always, I hope you're able to get something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. Yeah.
Made in 1958.
Yeah. I mean,
Is that the Coast Guard?
It looks like the Coast Guard.
It's
an interesting sounding helicopter.
They're far from home.
Yeah.
We are not near the coast.
No.
We're closer to the coast than Kansas, but
Yes, no kidding. It's always weird to me when I meet people who've never seen an ocean.
really,
Yeah, like, I don't.
I don't think. I am sure they exist. I don't think I've met anyone.
Well, it's because you live in Oregon. Everyone here has seen the ocean, but like you talk to people in the Midwest and stuff. Like to them, the Great Lakes are the ocean, which is weird. Like they go to the beach, and by going to the beach, they mean going to the lake. Like, anyway,